Yes, guys, welcome back to the Cannon podcast. Happy Monday. I hope you've had a lovely weekend of completely non-stressful Premier League football. We are here to talk all things football, all things Arsenal. Thank you so much for being here. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you like and subscribe. If you're listening to us on Spotify and Apple, leave us a review. Why not? I'm here with my boy, Rohan. George is stuck in traffic. Something in the universe does not want us three to be together.
We did do an instant reaction, to be fair.
They know we'd be too powerful. That's the issue. First things first. I hope you had a lovely weekend, Rohan. We did just say how much that game ruined it until maybe Liverpool gave us a bit of copium. How much do you want Harry Maguire's head on a spike? Just as we speak.
I have to say though, right? If you watch it back, the pass is awful. It's actually awful from Xerxes, and he's also right. That's a bit of a nick, right? A striker on his strong foot for on goal. Shoot. Just have the shot.
Shoot.
Yes. You're a striker.
But I mean, I suppose after your own fans boo you,
yeah. So actually, we should be blaming United fans for that moment. As always,
for everything, for absolutely everything. We will certainly get to the title race. Obviously, there is, Liverpool drop points, but we drop points at the same time. There's stuff we want to come to, so we will do that sort of after our analysis of the Brighton game away at the Amex, and then we'll of course come on to your questions and so on. Thank you guys so much for being here. Okay, let's talk about it. 1-1 at the Amex. I can't lie, and people probably saw it on the instant reaction. If you saw it, I was fuming. After that game, I was fuming. There's been a few games this season. I don't know what annoys me more, when we're bad or when it feels like the referees have taken stuff from us. But I think maybe the referees. Unfortunately, if you want a referee rant, you're gonna have to go somewhere else. We'll have a conversation about it, but we're not gonna go down that path. How were you feeling after the game? I just felt so dejected. Obviously, after Liverpool dropping points, it feels different. But I just feel, and I kind of want to come on to sort of the bulk of this, is looking at the things we can control, but also highlighting the things we can't control. I think this is something I really felt post that game. There's so many things that are going against us this season that we can't control. And there's kind of two camps of responding to that. One is, yeah, no, fair enough. And the other camp is, stop making excuses. Well, if you're getting absolutely insane decisions going against you, and your other title rival isn't, at what point do you accept that is affecting the outcomes? Of course, no one is saying, we are never sat here on this podcast ever saying that we're not at fault and the manager has nothing to learn and anything like that. But I just came away from it feeling incredibly frustrated at how this season is panning out. Obviously, then Liverpool drop points, so then everything's fine again. But yeah, that was how I was feeling.
I felt like really numb. Not gonna lie. I didn't feel angry. I wasn't upset. I was just like, it's happened again, isn't it? Like, it's not the first time. And now, we've been on podcasts for many years, me and you, Alexander. We have. Many. And we've been on podcasts on here as well. I've been on podcasts in which we've not got the win. And we've spoke about things that we didn't do well enough. I don't think there is many instances in which we look purely at referees. But it's so hard not to look at it in that moment. Like, it's so hard because it's another game in which the referee has massively influenced the game state. And it happened at the Emirates against the same team. And I tell you what, that Brighton manager, he's got such an annoying face, after press conference. He's got such an annoying face where he's like, he knows he can just rattle the entire fan base with his comments, because I think afterwards he was like, "Oh, it's a Stonewall penalty. We don't need to talk about it." And it's the same thing at the Emirates as well. And it's frustrating. And now we aren't exclusive to bad decisions. It's not just us. It happens to many teams across the league. I've seen Chelsea get a really bad one actually against Palace when they were 1-0 up and they should have had a Stonewall penalty. It happens across the league, but we can only focus on ourselves. And for me, some of the decisions that we get, I've never seen them being given before. I've never seen it. I've seen Granit Xhaka get sent off against Swansea in 2016 for a challenge that, again, I've never seen someone make that same type of challenge and get sent off. I've seen David Luiz get sent off against Chelsea in a last man challenge against Tammy Abraham, where there was the double jeopardy rule in which if you're the last man and if you have an intention of winning the ball, it's not a red card. He gets a red card. I've seen David Luiz get sent off against Wolves for something that was ridiculous. Nothing in that incident whatsoever. I've seen Martinelli get sent off against Wolves for something that we haven't seen again. It's in
two yellows
in one sequence. Yeah. We've seen Declan Rice literally touch the ball against Brighton. Touch the ball. Not even touch it. Probably get sent off. We've seen, and bearing in mind, in that game, João Pedro levered the ball into my back garden in India and got nothing. Got absolutely nothing for it. I was right in front of it. We've seen Leandro Trossard get sent off for delaying the restart, which, to be fair, he was, but then Jeremy Doku does the exact same thing, and he doesn't get anything. It's annoying. It's so annoying. And when the margins are so fine, it adds up. And we'll talk about the game. We'll talk about things that we could do better. But the overarching feeling that I have is that this season, certain decisions have massively cost us big points. And the reason why, I know from my perspective, I don't make excuses, because when I go back to the last 2 seasons, which we didn't win the title, there were refereeing decisions that cost us, but I never look at the referees as to why Arsenal didn't win the league in the past 2 seasons. I don't look at it. But this season, I'm sorry, it is annoying and it should be talked about because it is affecting us. And this idea of, Arsenal fans are making excuses. There was so much time left in the game to create, etc. And we'll get into it. But there was a sickness bug that has gone through the camp. Look at the team that was selected. That team, it was always going to be a slog. It was always going to be a slog. If you're expecting creativity every 10 minutes, creating a gilt-edged opportunity, it was never going to happen. So we have to look at these moments and we have to talk about it because it's hurting us, and...
Yeah. And how they influence each other, you make your own luck, but also the luck makes you sometimes. And I think these things do influence one another. And we said we weren't going to run about referees, but here we are. But you have to look at. I really don't. And there will be people watching and listening. And please, I'm not stuck in my ways on this. Please explain to me why there is no excuses, because there has to be a line where you say an excuse is acceptable and it isn't, and that's a blurry line. It's a complicated line. But to say there is none or there is all, I think are both wrong sides of the camp. If all our players got struck by lightning and were in a coma for 6 months and we lost the league, what was a no excuse? Of course, there's an excuse. It just depends where you put the line, isn't there? So and I think these things have to be looked at, and yeah, it's really frustrating. But of course, there's things that we can control. I think the first half was, it was frustrating. I again, just going back on that point, really, I look at Jorginho in the midfield. I look at the construction of the midfield, and it wasn't right for me. That was my main feeling of it. I think really the issue against Brighton was we had Jorginho in a game that absolutely he didn't need. I would never have put him in. He was okay. I'm not saying he was horrific, but he got pickpocketed a number of times. Mourinho, I wouldn't have played him in that game because I think the players are too physical around him. I think he's someone who you don't want in a transitional game. I'm beginning to feel, certainly with Mourinho. That is a day I would have played Partey, Rice and Odegaard as a midfield, and we couldn't do that. Exactly. That was just a day we could not do that, right? So against Baleba and all the rest of them, in that sort of those legs in that midfield, it's a very physical team, Brighton. I think it gets underrated because they've still got the De Zerbi tag. It's very, very, very physical. So again, it kind of comes back to the theme of the pod so far. It's we shouldn't be in a position where we're playing Jorginho again in that situation in a game where everyone wants the ball to feet in that Arsenal midfield, and we needed runners. And Jesus is dropping into the midfield, and Partey stepping into the midfield, and Jorginho stood in the midfield, and Mourinho stood in the midfield. How much of that game was spent with the ball ping-ponging around the centre circle and no one stretching the pitch? But then you have to take into account that would never have happened if the players were fit. So this is the issue. It's really hard to know where to go and to sort of find balance in this, and that's my frustration.
This is it. I agree with everything you say, and I agree with So I put a tweet out and I gave my thoughts on the game afterwards, and there were a lot of comments about this player, why he was picked, why was Thomas Partey at right back. Please tell me who we would have played. Please tell me. Like I agree with what you're saying. If we had a bunch of players who were obviously absent due to sickness available and we picked that team, absolutely I'd understand the question marks, because when we're looking at the opposition and their strengths, that wasn't a game for Jorginho. But who else would we have picked? I think there's rumours around Mars Lewis Skelly wasn't well. There's rumours around Zinchenko not being well as well. We just had to make the bodies on the bench, to make it look okay. This team that was picked was completely forced. So we can't nitpick on it, and that's why I'll go back to it. Everybody knew it was going to be a slog. And when we're taking all that into consideration, the first half was good. It was a good first half. We didn't give away much. There was that one moment in which, actually, you mentioned it, Jorginho got his pocket nicked, and we could have actually escaped, but Baleba does really well to jump in, and Adingra has a good moment in that first half in the box. That was a really good opportunity for them. But apart from that, we conceded nothing whatsoever. And when I go back to the point of the lineup that we had, it was as good as I could have expected, and we got a very good goal. And actually, what's really frustrating is the fact that the goal that we scored, I think it was a 29 or 30 pass sequence in which Brighton are pressing really high. We play through it. Mourinho does really well to kind of move towards the right-hand side to allow Jesus to stay higher. And then Waneri makes a really good run in behind, starting deep. It was a really good move, So the first half, I thought was really good in that aspect. If you thought that Arsenal were going to be creating freely with that sort of team, I'm sorry your expectations are too high with those players. We are not going to be creating freely with a midfield of Jorginho, Marino, Rice, and then your right back is Thomas Partey, and then your front three are all ball-to-feet players. It's...
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? It's like we can critique. It's hard, though, because it is finding the balance. Because, for example, Jorginho shouldn't have had his pocket nicked. Like he's smarter than that. I mean, I'm watching Jorginho. I'm going, this guy, in terms of knowing your next pass.
Yeah.
Oh, I've never seen anything like it. He's unbelievable. But then the moment you put him in a running race, he's absolutely cooked. Like, honestly. So, but this is the thing. Is like I'm almost asking for more, and I'm going, oh, come on. I'm looking at Marino in this game, and again, as I mentioned, I don't think this is a game for him. I thought Partey was poor in this game, but again, you're going, would they have been put in that position if that was the case? I think so. It's just really hard to kind of come away with any big conclusions. I do think I'm looking at the bench, and maybe this is a conversation for later, but again, something that maybe we can control is finding, maybe we can't control the illnesses and those sorts of things, but I want to empower us. I want Arsenal to, again, it's something I love in Mikel is that we don't feel sorry for ourselves. We whatever is going on and all these things are happening, the refereeing decisions are, maybe some people actually do think it was a penalty. I find that an insane idea, and I think I saw someone talk about the Jesus incident of Villa last year, which was the exact same thing, just with the feet. But we didn't get a penalty for it, so it's a separate conversation. But I'm trying to empower us, is what I'm saying. There's loads of stuff we can't control that's influencing the stuff that we can control, but let's try and empower us. I'm looking at the bench and there's nothing there. And that's maybe in these sorts of games where I look at the bench and I go, yeah, absolutely, Havertz is ill and this guy's ill and he wouldn't be there and we can't control that and can't control this. All that said, though, we have found ourselves in a position where we have nothing from the bench. And I think we can control that. This isn't a question mark around should we go and sign, because that question is done, Rohan. That question is done. The question is, can we at least hold our hands up in that area and say, looking backwards, maybe these are the sorts of games where making a signing in the summer, and this is what happens if you don't go and do that.
I think that. But again, that's something, in terms of Mikel Arteta's control, he's not got control over that. That depends on if the funds are there to be spent in January. And obviously, I think everyone knows that we need an attacking signing. I mean, we saw Liverpool today, the bench that they had. And obviously, we had players out ill, but still, the point stands that, we are a little bit light in forward areas. And they're bringing on, Jota, Nunes, despite having the players that they had on the pitch. And also you've got Harvey Elliott on the bench as well. So that's a massive difference. The other thing that I think we can improve on, and just going back to the game, and I mentioned it in previous pods, and actually it was a big frustration for me in the second half, was that Arsenal in the press, again, were really good. There are many moments in which we forced turnovers and we won the ball in promising areas. And for me, we are exceptional at that. We are arguably one of the best teams in the world at it. Certainly the best team in the world over the last 2 seasons. And the numbers are there to support it. But from the moment in which we win the ball back to then what happens afterwards, we're so stale. And I think that, going back to it, could be definitely improved on by signing better attackers. But at the same time, I think our mindset when we win the ball can be better. We can play a little bit more vertically in that scenario. Whereas when I look at Liverpool, and this is something I've always mentioned that we can learn from Liverpool in how deadly they are when they win the ball back. They're so vertical and they're able to get shots off really quickly. And they're really, really efficient at that. And there's some numbers behind it from Data, EPL Analytics, really good account in which Arsenal, I think, and this was, I think, from this data was taken on the 14th of December.
Yeah. I've just got it here if you want me to read it off. Yeah. So in terms of turnovers overall, Man City are the highest with 2. Well, you can go have a look at this because it's obviously difficult to explain over audio. But Man City are basically the best, and we're second in terms of the volume of turnovers. In terms of turnovers leading to shots, Man City are the highest, and then we're probably mid-table. But then in terms of our conversion rate, we are, I think there's 7 clubs worse than us. And I think we're sort of lower mid-table in terms of conversion rate.
And that, for me, you can look at, obviously, like I said, signings can help us there, getting better attackers, to put it simply. But also, I think when we win the ball back, I think we can be braver. And that stems from coaching, and that stems from things that we can do better. So, and I do think, had we have been better in that aspect, we might have been able to create a little bit more against Brighton, and then we may not be talking about the referee. The referee was a massive part in this game, but there are also things that we can do better, and that is something that Liverpool excel at, and that is something that we don't do particularly well. And that is something that we can control. And I've always felt this for a while, and it's quite interesting as well when, we talk about that lecture that Miguel Molina did back in 2021 in what Arsenal aim to do when they win the ball back. And it's all really good theoretically, and everything he said makes sense, but we just don't see it enough, in terms of those moments in transition. And that for me is probably up there as one of our weakest parts of our game, alongside playing against teams that are very physical and they're playing that a mid-block structure. You're looking at Newcastle, you're looking at Porto away, Bayern Munich, Everton, these sorts of games. These are things that we are weak at, and we can improve on. And I did feel that in the Brighton game. But your point is spot about, the bench is dying. We do need an attacker. If Arsenal want to win this Premier League, if you still believe that, it very much depends on January, and let's see.
Yeah, I think all the turnovers, I think that's related to it's just another aspect of our kind of transitional quality overall that I think we're just obviously not exploiting out this team. I think, a signing would obviously impact that, and that's a different conversation. I think maybe before we start to zoom out from the game a little bit, the only other meat on this bone for me is just to acknowledge that Brighton are a brilliant side. Yeah. I think sometimes what happens is we still have that sort of mid-2000s Premier League idea in our head that, any club that isn't basically United, Chelsea, Liverpool or City, would be all right. Honestly, like they are, I'm looking at their squad. I'm not saying we shouldn't beat them. We absolutely should. It's not at all. But the idea it's just going to be a walk in the park. It's not the case. I'm looking at Baleba, Ayari, Adingra, João Pedro, Igor Julio or Julio, whatever his name is. He has this lovely, I don't quite know how to describe it, but it's like the pass back across his body off the left from the sort of the middle of the foot with the fade on it. I can't quite describe it in an audio format, but I would love to show people. It's this pass that I love it when a left centre back has it and he's got it. But so many players there who I look at and I'm going, Baleba, mate.
Yeah, he's crazy.
He was unbelievable. He could play for basically anyone, I think, in the top 6. Ayari's been cooking this season. Gruder was great. Adingra is a brilliant winger, causing Thomas Partey all sorts of problems. Van Hecke, absolutely. The quality in this league, Estepinian, I think who he was linked to a couple of years ago. Verbruggen's could probably be Man City's next number 1. The idea that you're going to just turn up at Brighton and just walk over them with 6 first-team players out, I just think is fanciful. And I think you're right about sort of fans' expectations. And again, it is balancing it. It's balancing what we can do better, which is absolutely the turnovers. It's dealing with things, in the market. I'm looking at Jorginho and saying you shouldn't be there, but you still shouldn't have your pocket picked, alongside the things that we can't control, and accepting that this is a very difficult league. And when you're in a situation like that where the margins go against you in that way, in such a, some people will disagree with us, but I think an absolutely mad way with that penalty, at some point you just have to say, do you know what? That's the situation we're in. We can't go too hard.
Do you know what it is as well? It's like there's the narrative of Mikel has not adapted well to the injuries that we've had this season so far. And it depends on what your expectations are. The reality is that we've had so much adversity through injuries, through refereeing decisions, and also I want to go into the games that we've not done well enough as well. We sit second. We do sit second. So this idea that, we've completely collapsed is just nonsense. We sit second. Could we have been close to Liverpool? Yes. But have we been impacted by things out of our control? Yes. And I look overall at the season, right? If we break it down, what are the games that Mikel could have done better in? Everton, Newcastle away. You could argue Bournemouth away as well. I wouldn't argue Bournemouth personally because of what happened with the Saliba red card, which, by the way, that game, Arsenal fans will say, again, a refereeing decision that cost us that game. I personally think that was a red card to Saliba. I do, and I think that is in our in our control. But you're looking at Everton and Newcastle's games in which I genuinely believe Mikel Arteta could have done so much more in that game to get us better.
I think Fulham away.
But for me, Fulham away, I think if you play that game 9 times, we win it. There's so many moments we created in that game. So many moments. Thomas Partey missed from like a yard out in that game. So. But okay, if you want to bring that game into it, that's fine. But the overarching thing, you look at the other games in which we dropped points in. Chelsea, we played really well in that game. We played well. Very unfortunate not to come away with a win. Liverpool, we were the better team, and we ended that game with a back four of Thomas Partey, an injured Ben White, Kivior, and Miles Lewis-Skelly. And there are other games
against currently the Ballon d'Or favourite.
Exactly. Yeah. And then you're looking at the Brighton game, which we drew, 2 Brighton games. Refereeing decisions have massively influenced the game state. Whichever way you want to look at it, in both of those games, Arsenal did not look troubled. We didn't look troubled. Manchester City away from home, a big refereeing decision again changes what happened and how we had to play. And then obviously you've got Everton and Newcastle, which we spoke about, which Arteta can control. But we've had a lot of bad luck this season, and that is okay. It is okay to have that. It's not an excuse. There are things we could have done better, absolutely. But there are also other things that have happened that have led us to be in the situation that we are in. And now to make things worse, even when Yeri's out for a couple of weeks, it seems like, like you can't just ignore it, and if people think it's excuses, cool.
Yep.
That you're entitled to your opinion, but I can't sit here and ignore that. There's so many things that have happened that has led to this season not being the one that we wanted as it stands. So.
Yeah. I think that's really this game feels like the flashpoint of this feeling, which is that it's like there's stuff we can do better, but are we seeing the stuff that's going against us? Like, and I don't like being in that place of pity, but I've got a stat for you. There are 6 Arsenal players who have not been injured in any game this season. 6. Neto, who is cup tied and our second goalkeeper. Kivior and Jorginho, who no one would have in their starting 11. Ethan Nwaneri, who is now injured, so we're down to 5. Trossard, who again is not in anyone's starting 11, and Saliba. And Saliba was suspended for a game, so he missed the game. Like, that's on the injuries front. Okay, well, whatever, it's just injuries. Okay, look at fixtures. Here's another one for you. Arsenal and Liverpool have both played everyone in the top 12. Arsenal have had 9 of those games away from home and 3 at home. Liverpool, have a guess, complete reverse. They have had 3 of those fixtures away from home, 9 of them at home. Again, it's really difficult because I don't want to be victims, and I don't want to be this podcast that just comes on and just goes, "Oh, guys, everything's going to be okay." Of course, there's things we can do better. No one is saying that there isn't. And so I completely agree with you. If people want to say it's excuses, and that's absolutely fine. But I also think you need to be honest with yourself and be like, is it no excuses, or am I just frustrated at the team and I'm done with waiting and I'm done with feeling like there's things going against us, and therefore I have to find someone to blame. And I have to put all of the blame at their feet. That's the crucial part. You can blame Arteta. You can blame some of the players. You can blame the Cronkies for whatever, for some of the outcomes that are happening. We are as well. The question is it all of it? Is all of the blame at their feet? And therefore, is all the responsibility? And therefore, is everything that needs to be fixed at their feet? And the thing for me, Rohan, which is maybe a bit of copium, but actually I do feel it, is kind of moving forward. We've had a lot of bad luck, I think, so far this season. I think, and I hope, this is copium, things will start to even out over the course of the season. I can't look at our injury record. And by the way, for Liverpool, I think it's something like 13 players have been fit and available for every single game. I think there's maybe a few who was like one, but I think I worked out it was like, and it's honestly, it's like Salah, Diaz, and Gakpo, their entire front three have been available for every single game. Gravenberch, McAllister, and Szoboszlai have been available for every single game. And then the only players the only first team players who've been out for more than 3 games are Alisson and Konate. Joe Gomez, I think, is not amazing, but massively underrated, and Kelleher has been brilliant. So, you know, it's one of those things. So this idea that they've had that variance that we've had, I just don't think is fair. Surely,
you think so, wouldn't you?
Are we? You know, am I just deluded, or like? Can we hope in the back end of this season, considering what Liverpool have got to do in terms of the fixtures, considering, you know, I'm watching that game with them against United and I'm going, that's not a team I'm convinced, but they're not perfect. We're not perfect either by a long stretch, but they're not perfect. Can we expect a little bit of swing in our direction?
We can.
Surely.
We definitely can, and I've always said, and I'll reiterate it, that Liverpool will go through adversity and they will drop points. It won't be as plain sailing as it seems and as it has shown for the first half of the season. They will go through a dip. The question is if Arsenal can, you know, in those moments in which they drop points, can we attack full throttle and take advantage? And so far, we haven't done that. You know, if we just exclude refereeing decisions, which you can't though, right? Liverpool over the past, you know, 3-4 weeks, they've dropped points against Newcastle, they've dropped points against Fulham, they've dropped points today as well, and we haven't capitalised once. You know, we haven't done it once. So there've been opportunities. There have been opportunities, despite the excellence and what Arne Slot has done so far. You know, but the worry that I have is that, you know, Bukayo Saka is a massive miss for Arsenal, and I did this data pod with George, which you can check it out as well, and when I went into that pod, I was like, we all know the impact of Saka, you know, but I want to quantify it. I want to see how big that impact is. And mate, it's ridiculous. In terms of non-winning game state goals and assists, for goals over the past 3 seasons, Saka contributes to 70% of it. And assists, I think assists is 70%, goals is 60%. Non-winning game state moments. Those are the scenarios in which you really need your leaders to take responsibility and to take the game by the scruff of the neck. And Saka does that time and time again. We don't have him for at least 2 months, it seems, right? So we need others to step in. Now, for me, we don't have enough right now, and that's why we need to go into the market. We needed attacking signings anyway, but now we absolutely need one, you know, in his absence. Now with the Ivanieri injury as well, that's came through. And sometimes you don't really want to listen to what Arteta says. He seems to like... It seems to be like a disaster from some of his comments, and then it's not too bad with a player's injury. But we're out. Ethan Wanier is out, and we've got some difficult games to come as well. But I think that, for me, if we can keep our spine intact, if Saliba and Gabriel, if we continue to have good luck with Saliba and Gabriel, which, by the way, that is luck that we have had in terms of that partnership, you know, over the past 3 seasons, absolutely. We have had good luck there. Yes, Saliba, you know, went down in the back end of the 22 season, but if you told anyone that we would have been able to have a stable centre-back partnership over 3 years, anybody would have taken it, you know, so we've had good luck there. And when those two are there, alongside David Raya, alongside the structure that Mikel Arteta has implemented with a Declan Rice, Arsenal won't concede many chances. They just won't. You know, we've seen it. So that gives you really good reliability there, you know, defensively. It's going forward. If we can keep Martin Odegaard fit, and we can keep Kai Havertz fit as well. I don't think people realise the importance of Kai Havertz in this team. You know, in that second half, I'm thinking to myself,
Kai Havertz
I'm convinced that the game could have changed with Kai Havertz. And I still think that Kai Havertz, the opinion on Kai Havertz has been set by a lot of Arsenal fans, you know, in a negative way because of where he's came from and because of his price tag and his wages. But for me, I'm looking at a player in the back end of last season. He was our best attacking performer. That was inches away of getting that title. And he's our top scorer this season. I think he's got 14 goal contributions this season. He's not perfect. He has his flaws. But Kai Havertz is a massive part of this team in terms of the variety of ways that we can play. The amount of times we were going long in that second half, but we weren't able to hold it up and we weren't able to build any sort of momentum. Someone like Kai Havertz helps you so much more there. So if we can keep him fit and we can keep all our other attackers that we have right now fit, we can do something maybe. But for me, my confidence is not really there unless we act in the market in terms of the title. I think we can go aggressive in the cups. I think we can still do well in the league. But I don't think, as of today, we have enough to get ourselves. If you told me Saka was available right now, and all those other things I've mentioned in terms of a little bit more luck, I'd still back us. Mate. Because Saka, by the way, Salah's having a freak season. Saka was also having an all-timer season as well.
He's also on for his best season as well, which is
but we need luck. We do need some luck, Alex, and we need Liverpool to sustain some injuries to some of their pillars.
We'll just have some variance. I'll come to it in a second. I do in a second want to come to what we can learn from Liverpool. And I do want to finish with that before we sort of move on to questions and so on, because I think we spend a lot of time going, well, a bit of luck or whatever, but they are brilliant and there's things we can take from them. So I want to come on to that in a second. But you're absolutely right in terms of Saka and the sort of the confidence I have and this is the thing. The reason I think, and I said it on the instant reaction, the reason I think the title is in Liverpool's hands right now is because I think Liverpool will drop points. Do I back us to be perfect?
Yeah, exactly. No. Exactly where I stand.
That's my issue. So it's like, and on weekends like this is why this one kind of hurts so much and why the refereeing decisions hurt so much and why we're looking at ourselves so much is because this was a weekend where we could have gained on them. We could have gained 2 points on them. So it's really frustrating. Before we come to the Liverpool, what we can learn from them, I do want to come back to the fixtures thing as well, because I do think this is going on underrated, the point I made about the away games that Liverpool have got to play. Arsenal's remaining away games are as follows. We've got to go to Anfield and we've got to go to Forest. But from there, we've got to go to Old Trafford, okay, but consider where they are. And then it's Everton, Wolves, Ipswich, Leicester, and Southampton. We've got to play the entire bottom five away from home, and that's fine. Liverpool have got to go to Forest. They've got to go to Chelsea. They've got to go to the Etihad. They've got to go to Bournemouth. They've got to go to Villa. They've got to go to Fulham at Craven Cottage. They've got to go to Brentford. They've got to go to Brighton, and then they've got to go to Everton and Leicester as well. That is a big chunk of away games that I look at. Away at Forest, away at Chelsea, away at City, away at Bournemouth, away at Villa, away at Fulham, away at Brentford, away at Brighton. And I don't know how you feel, but if you go and do that, Liverpool, there will be Liverpool fans watching this or listening to this, so hear me out. If you go and do that, fair enough. Absolutely fair enough. And I actually think most Arsenal fans, I do feel, obviously there will be frustration at ourselves, but if Liverpool go and pulled out at like a 97, 98 point season, I'm not saying anyone will be happy, but they'll be happier than throwing it away to a 78 point Liverpool. You know what I mean? If you go and do that, then kind of fair enough, you deserve it. But I think that's what, alongside the refereeing stuff, alongside the injury stuff, alongside the variance stuff, alongside the other fixture stuff that we've been speaking about, alongside potentially us looking into the market, that's what I'm looking at to hold on hope to. But before we come on to questions and stuff, just to sort of close out on this, I do want to talk about what we can learn from Liverpool. And I did find that game earlier interesting for it. And I don't know, I'd be interested to hear what you think. The way Liverpool attack is something that I think needs to be studied. And I was sat there watching it going, I hope Mikel's watching this. The intent, the freedom, and specifically how quick, when they're in the final third, the patterns, there was this sequence of events that I just thought was absolutely bang on. There was a ball straight out to Salah from Kanate. And I just went, Saliba to Saka. That ball there. Salah holds on to it for just a second. Ball goes back, and then ball goes straight into the box to McAllister, who's running in as a runner from deep. And I thought, we don't have that pattern. We do not have that pattern. And there's other ones I want to come to as well. That pattern, ball goes out to Saka. We know what's happening for Arsenal. Odegaard's dropping in the pocket, and then he's finding Rice. Then he's finding maybe it's Havertz dropping out, or maybe he's going back to I don't know, whoever's part at the base of the midfield or whatever. That ball out, back and through, the sort of up, back and through stuff in attack, we don't have that pattern attacking wise. We have other ones in terms of the cutbacks and the creations from wide. By the way, I think Man United do really well in terms of in the middle third, the combinations they're starting to create with Diallo and Dallo and those players on the side. I think that's starting to cook for them with Fernandes. But that attacking pattern, that speed of attack, and it was happening consistently, we don't have that. There's other ones. There's the Gravenberch sort of slipped ball in behind from central that I don't think we have. There's a number of other patterns that we have, but I just saw that and I thought the speed of that, the consistency that was happening through the game with McAllister making that run, and the fact that I know we have those players to go and do that. It's not that we have to copy them, but the intensity and the speed basically is what I'm saying in the final third that they have. I want Mikel to look at that, because every time in the final third, it feels like we slow the game down. We're looking for the perfect action in the final third. We're waiting to provoke them. I felt this with Brentford, I think it was. There was opportunities on the side. We can go to the side. That's where the spaces were, because they packed the middle. But it just felt like we were obsessed with provoking their midfielders to move. And I'm sure we spend all our time in the video analysis sections going, right, when Ayari does this, or when someone does this, and you can see that there's all that stuff. Rice is checking his shoulder, he's dropping in, you can see players are moving and doing all that stuff, and we're trying to find spaces there. But sometimes speed is of the essence, and I don't feel Arsenal do that, and that's the one big thing I want us to take from Liverpool.
I mean, I said it early in the pod in terms of, that moment. One of the things that I feel that we can learn a lot from Liverpool, and it's not just under Arne Slot. This has happened in Jurgen Klopp's era time and time again in terms of the speed of their attack after they win the ball back. How many times when Liverpool win the ball back, from that moment do they generate a shot? They do it time and time again, and it's just like it needs to be studied, right? When they're defending a corner, the amount of times they have a serious overload in the transition where it's like 6v4 or 7v4. They're come in at ridiculous pace. And that's something is just the vertical mindset of Liverpool Football Club since Jurgen Klopp has arrived. And that's why a lot of people, if you ask neutral fans, when they look at Pep Guardiola, they look at Jurgen Klopp, who do they feel they enjoy watching more? A lot of people will say Liverpool because of how direct they are and how fast-paced it is. And I think that one of the things that Liverpool do really well, and it's kind of the trade-off, right? And it's a contrast to what we do. When we're defending a little bit deeper, and for example, when the opposition is looking to overload the flank with the fullback, in which the winger stands up off fullback, and then they have their own fullback look to overlap, our winger will track that fullback. That is a non-negotiable of our team. Whereas Liverpool, like Salah, for example, they'll cheat. They'll stay a little bit higher, and they'll rely upon the central midfielder and the fullback to defend that situation, and the players in the box to defend the box, your Konates, your Van Dijk. And they back themselves in that aspect, and when they do win the ball back, they already have more players further forward to be able to spring forward. And it's a game of distances, because some of our players, and by the way, this is what makes us so defensively solid in difficult game states in which we accept that we can't control the game with the ball. We're going to defend with a line of 5, or we're going to defend with a line of 6 to ensure that the opposition do not have anything in terms of being able to create chances. But the issue with that sometimes is that when you do win the ball back, you've got no outlets, you've got no players in which you can spring forward, and Liverpool cheat more with their wingers. And that's why Salah has a lot of opportunities. People don't realise the amount of opportunities Salah misses. We talk about Salah being this clinical monster, and he is, but trust me, he misses a lot of chances. He misses a lot of chances, whereas some of our wingers and our forwards, and this is where I will have a little bit more sympathy, it feels like at times in difficult games, if a Saka misses this chance or Martinelli misses this chance, we look so much at that moment, whereas Liverpool might actually generate 3 or 4 different moments, and then it's law of averages. You're more likely to score a goal, isn't it? So that's something that we can do better at, but I don't think our game model will ever move towards that side of it, personally. We've seen it in 22-23. I've mentioned it many times, in which there was a massive change in mindset in terms of how Arsenal have attacked and their intent when they have the ball. The structures have always been there in terms of a 2-3-5, a 3-2-5, overloading with 6, etc. The idea and the mechanisms, it's all the same. But in terms of our idea, we are not as brave in terms of playing the ball through central areas, because we see it as a way of, if we lose the ball, it becomes a very good opportunity for the opposition to transition and to generate a chance. Whereas we don't think of it like, well, if we do play that pass, we've got a really good chance we're going to generate a really good opportunity. Whereas Liverpool are a little bit more braver in that sense. So I think it boils down to bravery. And I don't think Arsenal will ever be that under Mikel. But there are things in which we can do better and we can learn from Liverpool. And I always specifically look at the transitions. From the moment in which we win the ball back, I think we are so stale in terms of what happens afterwards. And it kind of goes back to your point where, like, we win the ball back and it's like Liverpool will execute a couple of passes before they get a shot off. Whereas with us, we'll execute like 4, 5, 6, 7 passes, and then the chance is gone. The opposition is back in their shape. So that for me is the big thing with Liverpool, that we can do better from. But there are things they can learn from us. Yeah. I'll maintain it that our pressing is better than Liverpool. It is. The flexibility at which we press with is better than Liverpool. But it's
undoubted. If you look at the how transitional that game was, but again, it's all a trade-off. It's all a trade-off because they're accepting that they're going to deal with it, and they, in fairness, they do have brilliant large space defenders in Van Dijk and Konate. So fair enough. I think also, and this is the thing is I don't, in any what can you learn from Liverpool? It's not to become Liverpool, but you don't to edge a jot, ironically, up the system isn't to become them. It's just to learn, okay, actually, there's things they're doing brilliantly. Maybe we can do it. For example, I kind of prefer our usage of our eights and our fullbacks because it does give us that strength. But can our eights make that run that McAllister does occasionally and not be on the ball, and the fullbacks on the ball and they play the pass into the box? Maybe. I'm looking at Trent as well. I mean, defensively, he was shocking, and I don't know where his head is, but I think the freedom he shows and the amount he backs himself, just on an individual basis, the amount he backs himself and Salah backs himself, that's something I want in the team. And you can see it. Even Bruno Fernandes, he plays this outside of the boot ball. I think it's the Højlund chance he misses or something in the first half. I just think that's a pass that, how often do you see one of our players playing that pass? He does a Rabona. And I'm just like, okay, do you know what? I rate it. Mikel might go mad at you, but I rate that you back yourself and it's effective and it's inventive in that it's not in the Payet way where it's inventive but it doesn't really lead to anything. It's inventive and it leads to a chance. So I want our players to sort of hold on to that and sort of see that and move forward from it. And it's just to sort of conclude with this. Do you think Mikel will change? Because this has been a huge frustration for a lot of fans. And I think a lot of fans now, maybe because of 22-23, last season it wasn't really a thing necessarily. It's like, we're actually just more defensively solid, which is nice. I think fans are getting bored with how conservative we are and the football. And I've kind of joked about it. Like I remember we lost a few games and I posted this meme and it was like, stop using anti-Arteta ball language instead of, boring, say, slow burn or whatever. And I was joking, but it's kind of true. Who did I prefer watching as a football fan? Liverpool United. I can't lie. Do you know what I mean? I obviously love Arsenal when we win and we win well. It's, that sporting game was unbelievable when it clicks. But do you think fans first 2 questions, I suppose. Do you think the fans are going to become increasingly annoyed at that? And do you think Mikel will change it?
I think, and it goes back to what I said in the previous pod, if Arsenal were top of the league, I think there would be a massive change in the opinion people would have had. If Arsenal were Liverpool were and playing the exact same way and Liverpool was still playing the narrative would be different. I think people wouldn't have certain opinions. I think it all goes back to Liverpool. Do I think Arteta will change and play more like a Liverpool? No, I don't. I'm convinced he won't because Mikel is very statistical in his mindset, especially post-game, where he analyses the game and he sees it, and he will look at Arsenal over the course of the season. They look at the metrics, they'll look at XG, they'll look at everything, and XG obviously over the entirety of a season is a very good metric to understand sustainability and how a team will do, over 38 games. And Arsenal top that. Arsenal will top most of the metrics by the end of the season, and he will see that as evidence of, if we keep doing it, law of averages will get over the line. And I actually agree with that. I do agree with it.
And sorry to cut you off, but literally just to add to this, if you consider how much time he's going to have between the press conference, the conversation with his team, he always knows the stats. It's so interesting. It's like he's going to look at them, and that tells you exactly who he is.
But sometimes it is flawed. Sometimes it is flawed where if you look at individual games, like I had this argument on X the other day as well, and I can hear the other side of it, in which, like, for example, we spoke about it, the Everton game, Arsenal generated 1.5 XG, Everton generated like 0.1. You know, by the metric, Arsenal deserved to win that game. But from an opposition coach's perspective, Sean Dyche in that case, he's going into that game thinking, well, I am going into this game knowing I'm not going to be able to outplay you. So we're going to set the team up in which we concede territory and we're going to allow you to have the ball. And if you are given license to have the ball for 90 plus minutes and you only generate 1.5 XG, the benefit of the doubt and the look and the margins, I think my team has warranted that from a defensive point of view. Whereas Arteta will look at it, well, we generated more, you generated nothing, we should have won that game. And Arteta is correct when you extrapolate over the entirety of a season, but sometimes those types of games can happen in which you drop points and you look back at the end of the season for, had we have created more, had we have done a Liverpool type of game in which we're more vertical, you know, that could have been the difference. So I think it's flawed at times, but I do think over the course of a season, he won't change. He's a very stubborn guy. He believes in his ideas. And you've mentioned it. I know, right, when I watch Arsenal, I know when the opposition winger presses our centre-back, I know who's going to go where. I know it. I watch Arsenal twice every game. I know certain patterns that are going to happen. You know, and that idea, that methodology, he will believe is going to give this team success through the law of averages. If you keep doing that, if you keep topping the metrics every single season, your luck will eventually go your way. And I do back that, but there are things that we can improve on and learn from other teams. And I do think there will be certain things that they will try and take from Liverpool. But if you're expecting Mikel to change his entire game model to become very vertical and play like Liverpool, it's not happening. It's not going to happen.
Yeah. I think it's a really good point, especially around the Everton game, because you're absolutely right. He just won't change, and that's probably the frustration that some people feel. But also, when it works, people go, "Oh, it's great." It's like the Ange thing, isn't it? When it's working, he won't change. That's great. It's his principles. When he's losing, oh God, why won't he change? It's a very mathematical thing. Well, against every team, I'm going to try and have the most touches in the box. Against every team, I'm going to try and have the most final third touches. Against every team, I'm going to have the most final third entries. Against every team, and if we have that and we create the most XG, we're going to win. It's not always the case. It really isn't. And it's a very... You're bang on about this. I think it's a really good point. And I think Everton and Newcastle specifically are games, well, actually probably more Everton, that you look at and go, but a different approach can yield different results.
Do you know what it is? Just sorry to... But the Newcastle game, right? It's a really good example, actually. You bring this on. The Newcastle game, I think that was one of the most frustrating performances I've seen of Arsenal this season, because the approach that we went into that game is an approach that we've went against Newcastle, against this Eddie Howe team, which we go physical versus physical, and we haven't won. We've done it twice against them at St. James's Park, and we haven't won. The only time which we've beaten them, an Eddie Howe team, is when we looked to play through the lines more. We had Zinchenko, we played Jorginho in that game, who got man of the match, we played Xhaka, who was a staple, obviously, Erdegaard. We played through the lines. We generated some really good opportunities. And actually, XG in that game, right, had Newcastle winning it, the time in which we beaten them. But nobody who watched that game can tell you that Arsenal didn't have the better opportunities. They absolutely did. Whereas, I think the game that we played this season, which we lost 1-0, do you remember that Declan Rice chance at the end? That big chance, right? From the Saka cross, and he should score. Absolutely should score. I'm pretty sure Mikel, after the game, looked at that moment and was like, oh, that's a massive moment in the game. But we didn't create enough in the entire game. So you can't just look at that isolated moment. In the metric, yes, you're right. But in certain isolated games, it doesn't tell you the full story. Nobody can sit there with a straight face and tell you that Arsenal deserved anything from that game against Newcastle. We didn't deserve anything from it. But mathematically, statistically, numerically, he can go.
Well, So, no, I think you're right. Let's come on to your questions. Thank you guys so much for putting them in. You can always get them in on X before the podcast, or we usually put our little thing on Discord. And obviously the Discord one gets priority because there are lovely YouTube members and Patreons. So why don't we start on the Discord, Rohan?
Yes.
You got a question?
Got a question from Neo. Interesting one. What type of decision do Arsenal need to get from a referee before the consensus is we are treated differently? Is that level of general consensus even possible given the tribalistic / narrative forces at play among wider viewers? So what decision, will there be that will get the entire footballing community in agreement that it's not good?
I mean, it's a brilliant question. I mean, to put it this way, every time something goes against Arsenal, someone is in my ads going, well, there's no conspiracy, is there? I have never in my life said that Arsenal get the rub of the green. What I've always stood by is if you're claiming that the professional dickhead society, whatever they're called, Match Official Limited, if you're claiming that they are genuinely corrupt against Arsenal, you have to realise that, and not just in a banter way, you have to realise that is an incredibly serious claim. And that's what I've always said. Now, and then it's like, okay, then how do you explain the decisions that go against Arsenal? That's a much more complicated question, one that George and I had, and one that people didn't like my response to. But it's a really tough ask for me to believe that there is an actual corruption. Why then we get these absolutely insane calls? It's a very, very difficult thing to say. But then how you would prove that it is actually corruption is as I say, a very separate thing. To answer the question, I don't think there could be something, to be honest. Honestly, I was surprised that the what's his name? The guy who got sacked. I can't remember his name now. David Coote. I was surprised that the David Coote thing didn't generate a bigger thing, but ultimately people are because if you're on the Anfield Cannon podcast and you're you're looking for Arsenal are corrupt, sorry, everyone's corrupt against Liverpool, that would be a very good example of it's a very good example. So we saw a Premier League referee saying to another club that he didn't like them and he thought their manager was whatever he called him. That didn't prove to anyone that people are corrupt against Liverpool. So I don't think there's anything that anyone could say that would prove to anyone else that Arsenal are or Liverpool are or Chelsea are. Do you see what I mean? So I unfortunately, I think it is too tribalistic, but then I also don't believe there is a genuine corruption. I think there might be other things going on, but yeah.
The only way in which you're going to be able to have a good idea of if there's corruption is if you are able to watch every single team in the league in every game that they feature in the 90 minutes. You're going to have to watch every single game for you to be able to understand which teams are actually getting... And we only know it from the Arsenal perspective, right? We know this season that we have been undone by some really bad calls. And that is, I think, a very fair claim to make. But at the same time, for example, I mentioned it earlier in the pod, Chelsea should have had a stonewall penalty this weekend against Palace, in which when they were 1-0 up. They score that penalty, they go on to more likely win that game. Chelsea also were on the receiving end of a really poor call against Ipswich as well, in which Delap wins that penalty, and they go on to lose that game. So there are decisions that are happening to other teams as well, and...
Mate, if you look at the VAR record against Wolves...
Oh my God,
it's crazy. So, this is the thing is I think two things can be true. We've had some ridiculous, what we were saying earlier, ridiculous calls against us. Absolutely insane calls against us that are not correct. Objectively, which are affecting our title race 100%, and also other people, that happens to other people too, and there's not necessarily, this is the kind of the point I was making, not to reopen the conversation, but the point I was making is the level you would have to go to prove corruption. You'd have to look at so many factors, you'd have to watch so many games, you have to probably find emails, you have to find out when the meeting is at PGMOL, where they do a satanic ritual and sacrifice a picture of Arteta, whatever it was. You'd have to go so far. I think it's enough to just say they're incompetent. It's enough to say that they don't know what they're doing, and it affects everyone to some degree or another, and we've been affected by it. So yeah, I don't believe the idea that Arsenal referee differently in the sense that we get something way worse.
Although I would say with the delay of the restart this season, that has been a killer for us.
Well, that was probably the only one that you can say, okay, that they're refereed differently because they got 2 yellow cards where two people got sent off. But other people, this is what people don't understand. Other people did get yellows for delayed restarts. The problem now, firstly, Arsenal benefited or had the biggest problem basically from that. The problem now is it's a classic PGMOL directive that they just forgot about. Like foul throws. And like what they call it, when they did the added time, when they were doing added time last season, and they were making it 15 minutes added time, they just completely gone back on it. They are incompetent.
And this was so predictable as well, because when you saw this rule come into play, immediately when I saw it, I thought, that's not going to last the season. It's just not going to last. There's going to be a time in which they're just going to completely forget about it. And that's what's happening now. They've completely forgotten about it. And that's where I can understand. I'm frustrated more. I could say I'm really frustrated by the fact that, we've had 2 games in which it is massively infant game state. And now that rule is not even coming into question at all. And you're not even seeing it. Yeah. The other thing I will mention that question is that I do think football has become very tribalistic because of social media and how people are able to display their 100%. Opinion in front of so many other people. Like, for example, there could be, let's say there was actually corruption against Arsenal, right? But that won't stop opposition fans from bantering and saying it's not true, People are obsessed with ratioing these days, just ratioing people. And it's like...
But also, bro, like, it's kind of social media in general. And this is, I kind of learned this lesson. Like, I'm a fan with a degree of a following, and I don't agree that Arsenal... as I said, what I've said about I think we've had some horrendous calls, but if you're asking me to believe there's a corrupt agenda against Arsenal, that's a different conversation. But the amount of flack I took for that, it would be much easier for me to say I believe that there is an actual corrupt, even if you sorry, drop my AirPods, guys. Even if you don't agree with me, no problem at all. But you have to accept that it would be a lot easier for me to say that, because you get a lot more followers. It's a lot easier to say what everyone believes, or what the vast majority of fans want to believe, which is that they are the special ones that that the PGMOL are against, which I don't believe. But if you look at how social media works, be specific, like hyper, going on anything on you, and you sort of pander to that audience, your following goes up. Of course it does. So I think that's another aspect to it, and people are just in their camps, and then they're following their own club overall, and then they're seeing only the things that are going against them rather than everyone else. So they get the idea that it's just them. It's not. You're just following Arsenal accounts, so of course you're going to see things that are against Arsenal, because that's what people want to see.
Moral of the story is be true to yourself and think for yourself.
Exactly. Get out of the echo chamber. Let's come to Roshi Rowe, who says, should we emergency terminate the Neto Sterling loan? I like that it's emergency terminate, not the Neto Sterling loans, to free up loan spaces for this window. Who could we get in? We kind of spoke about this on TCB Live, right? Like it's a very Arsenal thing, I feel, for us to do some kind of cancel the Neto loan, get the second choice keeper done, and then do another Premier League loan. That feels very...
What would you do,
Arsenal.
Right? We cancel the Neto loan, we bring in the keeper, and that's it. You gotta laugh. I'll start laughing. I'll start crying.
I think that would be the closest I'd ever come to like a proper like full-blown vintage AFTV rant. Do you know what I mean? I would be absolutely...
Imagine we paid 25 million, that release clause for Joan Garcia, and we're like, yep, done enough.
Yeah. And I guarantee it would also be on the 31st, just for no reason. They could have done it now. They could have done it at the beginning of January and just got it done, and then we don't have a cup-side goalkeeper. But no, they wait till the 31st, Mate, just for no reason.
We do not sign an attacking player. Oh my God. Gross negligence.
But what do you think of the question though? Because I think there is something in it. If I struggle to believe there are no funds available, but if there aren't, we have to do something. So is that an option? I think it's got to be.
Maybe it's a little bit copium, but I would keep Sterling from now to the end of the season. I still think he can give us something. But we need something else as well. The Neto thing, honestly, mate, if we can actually sort the goalkeeping situation out, I would terminate it. He's not good. he's not good. I've watched a lot of. I mean, you watch Bournemouth. You're from Bournemouth, aren't you? You must know quite a bit about Neto. And from what I've seen, if we get a David Raya injury, mate, we're in trouble. Trust me, we're in trouble. And
it's a worry. I mean, luckily Raya's been brilliant. I think unfortunately because of the kind of the title race and that's all going on, he was getting his flowers at the beginning of the season. That's kind of gone away. I think he's been brilliant apart from maybe one moment against Brentford. So but yeah, if we lose him, we lose
so
a massive aspect of our play. It's not even just a goalkeeper; it's a massive. It's the guy who starts our build-up. So
the thing with Raya, actually, you know how we talk about how things we can improve on in terms of in transition. I'll always maintain that David Raya, is fantastic in terms of his mindset to kickstart transitions. The amount of time he's alert to the situation and he releases quickly. He is platforming those ahead, to do that. And these are small things that we would miss if we lost Raya. Now, obviously, law of averages, the chances of you losing your goalkeeper are, they're more slim than other players. But that's a situation of still a little bit of a worry for me if he did go down. So if we can sort that goalkeeping situation out, that'd be brilliant. But the overarching thing has to be the forward. And I do think we should keep Sterling. I think Sterling can do something if... it might be copium, but I do think he can do something. Yeah,
I hear that. Yeah, I think just to conclude, like maybe we cancel the Neto thing if we think we can do the second goalkeeper, and I'd be okay to cancel I'd be okay to cancel the Sterling thing if it helps us do something better. But I still think, regardless, numbers wise, we need something anyway. So I don't, and we've got money, so I
think we need to keep Sterling, and we need to do someone. We need to get someone else in. We need both. I think if you get rid of Sterling, you need two. Well, I mean, there's a good argument that we already need two. So, yeah.
Samsational on the Discord says, with the current state of available attacking options and the clear vulnerability of everyone in the league, in the month of January, would you forego long-term plans, whatever they were, and act for this short-term crisis on an attacker who might be a bigger risk, but you can get in January? I mean, I suppose this is the big question off the window, right? I just think two things. Never let perfect be the enemy of good. It's such a big thing in football. And I think because we're still in kind of project mode a little bit, we're still in this idea that we make one wrong turn and oh my God, it's all over. In the same way, if you make one wrong signing, if it topples you over, that means you weren't as stable as you thought you were. If you get someone in financially and it doesn't work out, you're not as stable financially as you thought you were. Like it's okay. You can make mistakes. You can make a little bit of a loss. It can happen. Teams do it all the time. The best teams do it all the time. They make a signing, it doesn't quite work out, and they move him on as quickly as they can. So that's a big thing for me. And the second thing is, I don't think we need to choose. Honestly, I think financially and numbers-wise, and I'm looking at the futures of Trossard, looking at the interest in Trossard from Saudi, I'm looking at the fact that Sterling is only on loan. I don't think Ranieri is going to be long-term a forward at the club. I don't think Martinelli is going to be a forward at the club around for much, much longer. There's really, like, being serious, and Jesus, being serious, is there an argument that, like, say in 2026, this time next year, Havertz and Saka, there's a world in which Havertz and Saka, if we get rid of Trossard and Martinelli and Jesus, let's say in the next two windows, is there a world that they're the only attackers we have left? I do think this idea that we need an attacker numbers wise and quality wise. So I don't think signing someone in January is going to prohibit us doing anything financially, but I also don't think it's going to prohibit us doing anything pathway wise, because I don't see this group being there.
That's the key, right? When we're talking about, like, for example, midfield or at the back, you sign X, that could block the pathway for this player or this player. Like, for example, if you sign, I don't know, if Arsenal went on to sign a left centre back, then you're thinking to yourself, well, what's the long-term future of Calafiori, right? If Arsenal sign a creative number 8, what's the long-term future of someone like a Ranieri? But across the forward areas, we could be coming into the summer window in which, and it's not, all of these things might not happen, but there's a possibility that Jesus leaves. There's a possibility that Trossard leaves. There's a possibility that Martinelli could be that big sale. There's a possibility, So you're talking about a massive revamp of our forward line, and it does need freshening up. So the question is interesting. I think if there is if there's a player that we absolutely want and he's available for X amount in the summer, but we can pay 20 million more in January, then I think it is absolutely worth paying the extra 20 million now because we have the scope to do it and we need it as well. There's no point waiting later down the line when we know what we're generating in terms of our revenue, in terms of Champions League. But we're going to finish in the Champions League, at baseline. We're going to do that. We're going to get money from that. Our revenue from the stadium and ticket price, etc. We are in a very good position to take some risk. Let's take some risk. What's really infuriated me is and it always goes back to what Liverpool are doing, right? Arsenal's recruitment under Mikel Arteta is now being questioned by many people, which I think is just so unfair when you've considered what we have done over the last 2 seasons, what we have done, what the squad was before his appointment to what it is now. I don't think you can argue over what we have done in the window and the successes that we've had. There are certain players that haven't worked out, and that's fine. It happens, But the reality is that this forward line needs a massive revamp, and as you alluded to, I don't think signing someone in January is going to affect our long-term plans because there are players who are going to go, and we need to add more numbers. It's both quantity and qualitatively as well. So,
I just I can't imagine. I've said this before. If we're going to go and do like a release clause in the summer, do it now. If we're going to go and do £100 million and that player would be, if we're going to do £100 million on Isak and he's available in January for 120 million, do it now. We're not talking it's 300 million in January and 20 million in the summer. Do you know what I mean? If it's an extra bit of money, but you're sure on the player, go and do it. I mean, this is very early. Are we worried that it's the 5th and we haven't heard anything? I'm not personally, but I think if another week goes by, I'm going to start to be like,
I mean,
I would have liked something to happen straight away,
sure.
is my point.
I've kind of just told myself in my head, we're not going to do anything, so I don't feel as bad.
Bros on the Doomer gimmick.
Let's see in a week.
Let's do this. Let's see. Let's do a few from X. Tricky_Reds93 says, what can be the catalyst for Liverpool to lose points for the rest of the season? Contract sagas, and this is another thing we haven't discussed. We talked about injuries and fixtures and loads of other stuff, and obviously their transitional nature, which can bite them in the bum, I think, and probably will in certain games, especially at home against a lot of the lower teams, which they will be coming up against. But I do think the contract thing is another thing that needs discussing. The longer that goes on, I think probably with Virgil, it can just get to the end of the season. He strikes me as someone who is the sort of guy who will just sort it out at the end of the season, and that will be the case, and he'll just make the right decision. He seems very fully focused. He's club captain. I can't see that causing a big problem. But this Trent Real Madrid story, Salah saying they're far away, I do think those two feel more like they could cause an issue. I'm not saying they will, but there's a potential there.
I mean, I think the Trent thing could cause real issues, but again, it's how much do we know about these situations? I do think the Trent Real Madrid thing is going to happen. I think Salah will sign on. I have this feeling where it's just going to happen at the end of the season. I think Virgil will sign on. But I think you gave me a little bit of copium in terms of their fixtures in the second half of the season. They're hard. They're very hard games, especially the grounds that they've got to go to. And I like we said, I'm looking at the game, and one of the big weaknesses that I've seen of Liverpool this season is that space between their backline and midfield in transition. Where you can really exploit it. And Man United had so many opportunities in that game in which they could have really hurt them. And got a win. So there are weaknesses there, but I think for me, the thing that will give me confidence is if they do sustain some injuries to some of their key pillars. Because I think right now, Arsenal, we've had no continuity whatsoever in terms of being able to pick a settled 11, whereas Liverpool have had the opportunity to do that time and time again. And I know people will say that they could argue that's an excuse, but I don't see it as an excuse. It's absolutely massive. We saw what happened for Arsenal in 2024, in which we were able to have some form of continuity and what we were able to do in terms of points. We've not had that this season whatsoever. And I think if Liverpool do sustain some injuries, I think there is an opportunity for us to get back into it. But that's my only confidence right now because of the gap that is already there. I know that sounds kind of like doomer, and I am usually someone who's very optimistic, but just don't think it's our year in the Premier League. I don't think it is. And I think that's... Personally, I think that is okay with some of the things we've seen. What wouldn't be okay is if we capitulated from now to the end of the season. That is not okay, you know. But if Arsenal, right... Let me put this to you. Let's say we finish second and we compete well, but again, we just don't do enough, right? But we win one of the cups. We do better in the Champions League. Would you take that?
Bro, as long as I feel, as long as January we show the right intent, as long as, let's say, the injury situation improves, the fixtures in the back end of the season are a little bit easier. I think as you say, in a cup competition, as long as we show good account of ourselves, I would ideally like to win one of, if not both, the Carabao and the FA. We do better, and we've got a chance. As you said earlier about the spine, we've got a big chance of the Champions League. I think people are really writing us off there. I'm not saying we're favourites, but this idea that Dortmund were in the final last year. Who knows? It's one of those things. And let's just see how we go. We've had a year in it and a bit of experience now. I think there's every chance this is a very successful season. As you say, I think the league is Liverpool's to lose now, to be totally honest. I think as we've spoken about with, this idea that they're 9 points ahead, but it's more about how we respond when they've dropped points, and we saw it this weekend. But you don't know. But this idea that the season is just over because we can't do well in the league, I don't really buy that. I think, we can come second, we can show some intent in January. If we get our players fit, I think we can run them very, very close. I still think it's unlikely, but I think we can run them very, very close. I think people, honestly, I think most fans, if they felt, as I say, and then also next summer as well, like in retrospective, if we went and did something properly, I think people would be like, it was a shame we didn't do something last summer. But considering we won something, under Arteta, feels like, we got our players back in second of the season. We had this great run. We did well in the Champions League. We've now gone and signed this player. It feels like we didn't do the right thing last summer, but we responded, and therefore most people would be okay. I think the season after would be probably lights out or nothing in the Champions League or the Premier League. But, I think people would be like, look, okay. You know what I mean? Most fans. Yeah. But also, bro, like some fans are just going to be like, nope, he's done. And this is the thing, and this is the problem with this season. Maybe we should finish here. The problem with this season is no matter what happens, while we're behind Liverpool in the league, any drop points will feel like a disaster. And no one wants to talk about it. No one wants to fat chance many people are listening to the podcast at this point, because I'm not like that. I barely listen to content when we lose. It feels like we lost when we drop points. And until we're closer to Liverpool, until they're dropping more points, until things even out, that's just the way it's going to be. And it's a shame. It is a shame. That is it.
Like I said, it always goes back to Liverpool. Every time we drop points, it will go back to what Arne Slot is doing, what Liverpool are doing, X, Y, Z. When Liverpool play a game and they win, it will go back to, see how they attack here, see how they do here, see how they're much better than us in this aspect. Yet Mikel's had 5 years and, we're not better than them in that regard. You can't win. And also, if Arsenal finish second and we run Liverpool close, let's say, and we win both the cups, let's say we win the FA Cup and the Carabao Cup, it still won't be enough for some people. It still won't be enough. There's always different narratives that arise. And you can't control that. I know there's going to be a lot of comments in this pod that is going to say, these two clowns, excuses. Yeah. Fair enough. But I'm sorry. I sit in the camp of, I look at this season, and I think we've had a lot of hard luck. I look at our last 2 seasons. I look at what we could have done better. And I think that is the driver as to why we didn't win those 2. Although 22-23, we had some hard luck towards the end with Saliba and Tomiyasu. But I just think this season has been unprecedented. And we've had so many things that has not happened to us before. And it's hurting us, and for me, it's not a disaster if we don't win the league, given that context. I think it would be a disaster if we capitulated, and let's say Liverpool had an awful second half of the season, but then we also have an awful second half of the season. That's where I'll be like, that's not good enough, So
yeah, especially with players fit and everything we said about fixtures and stuff. Okay, we'll finish there. Thank you for being here.
It's good therapy
for your weekly Arsenal therapy session. We'll be back. George and I have got a rewatch coming midweek, probably post the Newcastle game. We've got instant reaction to the Newcastle game on Tuesday. Obviously, the main pod coming out Monday. TCB Live Thursday. Instant reactions to the United game on Sunday as well. And also a youth pod coming out as well. So lots to look forward to if you're a patron and a YouTube member. But if not, thank you so much regardless for being here. Thank you, Varohan. That's your name. Thank you, Varohan.
All good. Feel a little bit better after that, to be honest.
Good. So do I. Hope you do too. Thank you all for being here. Thanks for watching. And thanks for keeping it Arsenal.